we've got the RBH Sound 55 IR LCR bookshelf speaker review discussion. That's what we're going to be talking about in today's video. Hey folks, I'm Gene Delasalo with Audioholics. We got James Larson back again for another video. How you doing, James?
I am good.
Awesome. So you had some RBH speakers in. This is a new model for them, and I think they're only selling it direct right now. It's the RBH Sound 55 IR. You call it stand mount. I call it bookshelf loudspeaker.
Call it what you want. they need a stand. That's basically, they need a stand. You can call them bookshelves. I don't have nobody's gonna put these things in an actual bookshelf.
That's kind of an outdated nomenclature, but it's got better
really
SEO value, so we go with that. So, all right, so basically, this is a new model for RBH. Want to make sure everybody knows RBH is manufacturing and making all their speakers in America. Of course, they use globally sourced parts, but everything is assembled in Layton, Utah.
Yeah, that's pretty impressive. That they're kind of made in America. I mean, I guess per strict FTC rules, you can't say made in America, right? Because some of these parts are coming from different parts of the world. But to have the cabinet assembled and made and painted and finished and the packing done all in America, that's way more than anybody else is doing, really.
And quality controlled too. All tested, everything.
Yeah, it's a lot is going on. Way more of this speaker is made in America than most other speakers. I mean, none of the other speakers are made in America.
Let's go over some of the specs here. They're $800 a piece. I don't think the price is on this page, but I just want people to know. It's an MTM design. It's got the 1-inch AMT tweeter. It's actually a pretty darn potent tweeter. You've reviewed other products from RBH with that tweeter, I believe.
That specific, I reviewed other speakers with that tweeter. I don't know if that's specifically that exact AMT, but I have dealt with other AMT tweeters, and they've all been very good in the past. So these are good AMT too. So yeah.
Now these have two 5¼ inch aluminum cone drivers. They have a phase plug, right?
Yeah, that's yeah. I have the speaker behind me. You can see this thing has the grill on. Yeah, and it has a real phase plug. The phase plug is fixed. You can see there's the grill. I'll just take it off. Nice grill.
Yep.
Yeah, really good grill. And the phase plug it's fixed on the pole piece, so it's a real phase plug. It's not some goofy plastic cone. Yeah, it's not a prosthetic. It's real. It's a really good driver. Yeah. So yeah, 6 ohm load, which is kind of it is. I would argue it's more 4 ohms, but it's not really a bad load either way. Crossover frequency 3 kilohertz, which is good because those woofers that's great for dynamic range to have a higher crossover frequency, so that especially with such an aggressive crossover slope of 4th order 24 dB per octave slope, right? That means lots of output, and that's really good because these things are geared for lots of output above the deep baseband, which these don't really do. They're meant to be with the subwoofer. High sensitivity at 90 dB, and they're not big. They need a mount, right? But these are for when you are using subs and you want something with punch. Before we reviewed the tower speaker variant of this, which had the dome tweeter, it only had one mid-range driver, but it had an 8-inch bass driver. That's for a full range 2-channel system. Yeah. This is for when you have a sub and you want way more dynamic range. So this will have more punch than the tower speaker, but it won't do the bass. The tower speaker is tuned to 30 hertz, right? This is tuned to 70 hertz. So this is when you have a sub and you just want more dynamics. And so I think since most people have subs, this makes more sense than say the tower speaker, right? For most people,
especially if you're doing a home theater, you want LCR, matching LCRs. You want something high dynamic output for movies, and yeah, makes sense.
So here's the packing. Very good packing. You can see double boxing, but not traditional double boxing. There's a good standoff between the inner box and the outer box with the foam pieces. So yeah, you want since you have to order these over, since you have to have these shipped, you can't just pick them at the store. You need good packing, and thankfully these have here's pictures. Grills versus no grills. I think the grills are actually pretty nice looking, but it makes them look minimalist stylistically, right? Without the grills, they look cool, but a lot of people might prefer the grills. And either way, they're fine. There's the rear view. There's a double ported. Um, there's a close up of the AMT tweeter. It's a very powerful tweeter. AMTs very very wide, very good dynamics, but they just don't do lower frequencies that well, right? So unless you make them huge, right? So like this is the one to get for this design. The AMT tweeter is the one to get. Although you do pay a premium for that. There's a dome. There's a variant of this speaker that has the dome tweeter, right? But like get the AMT one because the dome tweeter won't have as much dynamic range of those high frequencies.
The only weird thing I see about the speaker is the terminal cup is horizontal instead of vertical. It's meant for the center channel to be horizontally placed.
Yeah, you can do it either way. This configuration, the 55IR, there's you can order a center channel variant of this. It's going to be the same thing except for the tweeter. The tweeter is going to be rotated 90 degrees, right? So like
Right.
it's the same. It's basically the same speaker. It's a center channel version of this, right? Except for the orientation
I
of the
just
tweeter.
don't understand why the terminal cup is turned sideways.
They probably just didn't want to make a whole different cutout for they just wanted to use the same speaker for the center, and since it doesn't really make a difference, why not, right? It's not gonna make the slightest bit of difference as far as
No, it's
anything
just
else is
weird.
concerned.
I'm sorry, RBH. That's weird.
I don't mind it. I think it's fine. It's probably a little bit easier to deal with when you're hooking up speakers anyway. So here's a driver of, I mean, here's
Half
the close
basket.
up. Yeah, this is a cast aluminum basket, heavy duty stuff. It's a very good build quality, as we said, a real face plug. It's just a good driver, but you're paying for it. It's not a super inexpensive speaker, so you're getting a pretty good drivers for the cost of the speaker. Here's here's where we test the speaker. So we'll talk about how it performs. We boost the speaker way up in the air, so there's no acoustic reflection. You have to do this if you want anechoic data. If you want comparable data with other stuff, Room can't do this for you, but like so you either an anechoic chamber or you need to do this, high way up in the air outside. Either will get you in a echo free or no acoustic reflection condition. So yeah, so there's how I measured the speaker. It was a nice day out. You can see the speaker's way up there. Here's the spinorama response. So it's not quite perfect. There's a little bit of I wouldn't say a problem at the crossover, but like the crossover frequency isn't the woofers and tweeter aren't mating perfectly. But how it sounds, I always thought it sounded good when I listened to it, and so when I got these measurements back after I did them, it's like, how did I miss that? It's like that it looks like there's a dip in the mid range frequency.
Mhm.
Actually, it's a lot like what you call the BBC dip, and I talk about that in the review. So the BBC dip, how they deliberately carve out a chunk from 2 kilohertz to 25 kilohertz, or like somewhere in that range. They take like I don't think RBH did this deliberately, but this is a voice and loudspeakers have had in the past, right? And so like, is it perfect? Like, well, a lot of speakers have deliberately voiced this way. So what I did is like, I was like, when I listened, how did I miss this? So I did a back-to-back comparison with the reference speakers, which have a perfect frequency response. You've seen them before the 51 or the 1802G speakers I have that we had custom made for us, right?
By
And like
Dennis
those are
Murphy.
yeah, by Dennis Murphy, perfect
Yeah.
speakers, right? And like I think those speakers, like, they are more neutral, and I do think they sound more accurate and a little bit better. These speakers actually sound really good. So I wasn't missing anything, and in comparison, these speakers still sound like they sound very good, but, like, I it might sound a little bit more polite than a speaker with an actual flat frequency response because there's a chunk of there's a small dip in the mid-range, and so, like, I think the voicing is fine. I think speakers sound good. The measurements aren't perfect, but like this is a case where the measurements, most people would think these sound great, and the measurements, like, you don't need a totally flat response for something to sound good. These sound
Mhm.
very good, and well, there's a small dip in the crossover region that who cares about? You know, it's you don't hear that. You hear peaks, but you don't really hear dips that well,
Yeah.
unless
Yeah.
the dips are really wide in the queue, right? So
Right.
here's the horizontal response, like a 3D view of the horizontal response. It keeps a very good. It keeps its shape out to a pretty wide angle. It's mostly a neutral response out to a wide angle, except for that dip around, like, say 2 kilohertz, a very narrow dip, right? So this is a pretty good response overall. You can see the side profile on the next slide. See, it's a pretty good response. Again, you see that dip. that dip is not really all that audible, or if it is, it's mild. It's a mild, like, makes the speaker a little bit more polite. Um, which is why the BBC dip always existed in the first place. And so, like, the good performance in the tweeter, the woofers generally have good performance. The crossover isn't quite perfect, but the speakers actually sound really good, and I write about that in my review. Speakers, these are really good sounding speakers. So, and they keep the dispersion is actually pretty consistent. So you have a little bit of a waistbanding around the crossover frequency, but everywhere else it's pretty wide, and the beaming, what we see with AMT tweeters is that the higher frequency you go, right? A dome tweeter would beam a lot more aggressively. And beaming, to say beam is to say, like, that means that the dispersion, it narrows as you go higher in frequency, right? You need to be more closer to the on axis, like, angle to hear high treble. This does beam, but not as much as, say, a dome tweeter. But the beaming, I mean, you still have, like, it's maintains like a 30-degree width out to above human hearing at 22 kilohertz, right? Which is, you know, far above what you and I can hear, Gene, and
Oh,
probably
way
any
above.
of our listeners. Yeah, we can't hear that high. Probably none of our listeners can either, right? So, like, it actually maintains a pretty wide response out to all to the, the top of human hearing. So, like, basically what we're saying is it's a wide dispersion speaker. It sprays sound evenly over a wide angle. Here's a picture of the here's a graph of the vertical response. So here's how the speaker behaves up and down on the vertical angle. And so MTM designs where the tweeter is flanked by woofers, right? The woofers, when you go far off axis, they start fighting, and you get this kind of these dips right off axis. And so what that means is, for an MTM speaker, a vertical MTM speaker like this, you want to stay level with the tweeter, right? You want the tweeter to be angled at you, because if you go too high or too low an angle on the speaker, on the listening axis of the speaker, then the woofers they start phase canceling, and they start taking chunks out of each other's response, and you end up with some dips. I think the next slide actually shows that a little bit more clearly. Yeah, so, like, there's you can see where the crossover kind of kicks in, and where that like kind of like funky pattern below the crossover frequency, right? That's comb filtering from the woofers fighting, right? Because they're not equally a distance from the microphone, right? And you can kind of hear that if you listen out those angles too. But most people will be listening with the tweeter relatively close to their ear, so it's not a big deal. But the bottom line for these graphs are, you want the speaker to be level with your ears, roughly level.
Well,
Give
and
it
then
time.
not to give an MTM a bad name, because an MT has its own disadvantages. It's not a symmetric driver loading on the vertical axis. You have a woofer on the bottom and a tweeter on the top, so the reflections are going to be different from the ceiling versus the floor as a result.
There's trade-offs in everything you do in
Yeah.
loudspeaker design. There's gonna be trade-off whatever you do, no matter what. There's a trade-off for
Personally,
this.
I've compared MTs to MTMs of the same brand, and in almost all cases, I've usually prefer the MTM because you have more dynamic range. You have two woofers now doing the mid bass and mid range as opposed to one. So, and you also have higher sensitivity, and they tend to sound a little more effortless. And that's what you've noticed with this speaker. The speaker is very high dynamic, even though it doesn't have a lot of bass. It's got a lot of dynamic range.
Yeah, especially for the size, and that's kind of the point of the speaker. Yeah, so, like, this gives up a little bit bass. You can see that here's a graph of the low frequency response, the bass, right? And so the speaker rolls off. It has a kind of more gradual roll off until you get to the port
It's
tuning,
like
just below the
second
port
order.
tuning. Second order, but kind of between, like, around the port tuning, even it's like not even like second order. It looks to me like almost first order, right? Until it really gets below port tuning, right? Then it starts rolling off at, like, fourth order. So, like, yeah, so, like, this, it doesn't really do deep bass. If you wanted, you could use these without a sub for maybe acoustic music, right? So it does bass fine above, say, 60 hertz, I'd say, in room, right? But, like, these are meant to be used with the sub. And
Mhm.
and down to subwoofer, normal subwoofer crossover frequencies, they have a lot of output. They do fine, right? And they have a pretty flat response above 100 hertz, and, like, lots of dynamic range, but not much deep bass. That's kind of the point of the speaker. Here's the graph of the
Impedance.
impedance, the electrical load of the speaker. This is telling us how well it'll play with amplifiers. Um, this is Okay, RBH says this is a 6 ohm speaker, maybe nominally by some technical specification. I would say this is a 4 ohm speaker because it dips below 4 ohms in a pretty critical range around 200 hertz, right? And that's such a heavily used range that it's essentially a 4 ohm speaker. I would characterize it as 4 ohm speaker, but it's a mild 4 ohm. Basically any halfway decent amplifier will run these speakers with no problem. It's
I mean, technically, if it's a 4 ohms rated speaker and it can't dip below 3.2 ohms, that's what that red dotted line means, right? So you got to give them some wiggle room. I guess they could call it a 6 ohm speaker because it's above that dotted line.
it's above the dotted line. Is it really 6 ohms? I don't think so, but not really. No, it's not a 6 ohm speaker. It's a very benign 4 ohm speaker is what I'll say. Any amplifier, any amplifier you run on except the cheapest possible AVR amp, it's gonna sing with no problem. It's gonna be beautiful. The phase angle is all really good too. It's just it's fine. It's a fine impedance though. There's nothing to worry about here.
Yep.
Bottom line, pros, wide dynamic range. If you with two mid ranges and a beefy AMT tweeter, these really can get loud. Very nice sound signature, right? Like some people might want a flatter response just for technical perfection, but they sound really good. I write about that in my review. They sound pleasant, really. They sound nice and this is good. And on a wide sound stage, because they're a wide dispersion speaker, you get sidewall reflections, and that it gives you a more wider sound stage. They
More
like
spacious.
more spacious. Yeah, great for orchestral recordings and stuff like that. Well made. Yeah, they are well made speakers. They use HDF instead of MDF. There's two window braces that above and below the tweeter. So they're pretty well built. They use very good drivers. It's a good crossover, right? Well made, and it's well made especially considering the cost and American manufacturing. So much of it is made in America, versus the cost and the materials. That's really good for the price, right? Really good.
Yeah.
Cons, I'd say not the easiest electrical load, but really no. It's just I just had to pick something that I didn't like. You can't run them on a cheap amp. But conclusion: a great speaker for a front stage for a small home theater or family room. A 5.5 can get loud and it isn't massive in size. Does require a subwoofer. Not super cheap, but it's well made, uses good parts, and is largely manufactured in Subway USA. The point of these speakers is that it's a stand-mount speaker that gets really loud and is not large. They pack a punch and they're not. I guess you can't get a sense of their size since they're kind of far back from me. So I'll pick them up. I'll pick it up. Not a big speaker, right? And
Oh yeah.
it's not big and it's really powerful. So yeah, if you and it yeah, it's something to use with a subwoofer if you really want dynamic range. And so that's the point of these speakers. And if that's what you're needing, I think that's what a lot of people really want. This is a really good choice. And
So just a point of clarity, if you buy these speakers as a pair and then you want the center channel, you have to actually order the center channel version so they flip the tweeter.
yeah, that's all they're gonna do. They're gonna flip the I mean, there might be some. I haven't confirmed it, but there might be some changes in the crossover. I don't think so. I wouldn't guess so, but they may change crossover to attenuate some, the dispersion a little bit, and the horizontal center channel version of this. I don't think they do, but maybe they do. But
Mm.
as far as I know, all they do is rotate the tweeter. Competing loudspeakers. There's a Martin Logan XT B100. I hate those speakers.
I know you
Awful.
didn't like those.
Yeah, there's the JBL synthesis. Okay, so these are all okay, I should say these are all smaller stand mount speakers that have high output. And that's what I consider this speaker, the class of the speaker. In that $1,000 to $2,000 range, right, per pair. So it's small speakers that pack a lot of punch, but you want a subwoofer with them. Like I said, the Martin Logan XT B100s, I hate those. Don't buy them. There's the JBL synthesis for 4309s. I haven't heard those. I think those will be pretty good though. JBL is a pretty solid
Yeah.
manufacturer. There's JBL HDI 1600.
They discontinued the HDI series. I love that series.
Oh, they did? I didn't know that. Huh, that's
Yeah.
news to me.
I
Those are
think
good.
you can still get them. Like, I think Audiovice still has them, but yeah, they're discontinuing them.
That's a shame. I reviewed the 3800 tower speakers. Those were darn good. Those are
Yeah.
really good.
I love those
Yep.
speakers. Yep.
Well, that's a shame, but they would be pretty good, like, alternative to these, but these very well, they're both I know the HDIs are really good. Uh, there's the Arundel's 1961 monitors. Well, those are very good. They were discontinued for a while, but they just brought them back. Those are really good. We have a full review on those. Very good speakers, and they're made in China. They're a lot less expensive for that reason. I think the difference between those would have a flatter response, more accurate and neutral response, but they probably wouldn't be able to achieve the dynamic range of the RBH speakers.
Mm.
And like, honestly, there's not a whole lot of speakers in this class of like small home audio, like speakers you can put in your living room that are stand mount that like have a ton of punch. And so one, I was just listening to everything I could find, and one in this range is the Shoe Research CCB8, which is way less expensive. They're good. They're not quite as smooth as the RBH speakers, but they're pretty good, and we have a full review of them, and they're a lot less expensive. So if you're looking for something in this class, you don't have $1,600 to spend, right? The Shoe Researchers are half as expensive and do the same thing. They pack a ton of punch in a small package. There's the Monitor Audio Silver 107Gs. Those have like a dome tweeter and an 8-inch woofer, which a lot of like bookshelf speakers in this class don't use 8s.
Yeah.
I think those would probably be pretty good. I haven't heard them per se, but Monitor Audio are as a solid manufacturer, so they'd be good. I doubt very much they would have the dynamic range of the RBH speakers, though.
Yeah.
They're not going to. They're just not going to. Not with that dome tweeter. I'm thinking there'll be good speakers though. Here I added the JTR Kalos 265, which we might end up reviewing in the future.
Yep.
So they have an MTM2 with a horn-loaded tweeter. I think they're not far from the same size as these, with less in depth, so you can put it on wall. But they're going to have way more punch with the kind of drivers we're using, right? But they're obviously way more expensive. So like you could use them in a larger home theater, whereas these, though, that's why I'm listing them, because high output, small size, right? And requires a subwoofer. So like I think we're scheduled to review those or something in the same class from.
I think we're going to do the 465s. I actually got to hear the 465s at Audio Advice, and I'll put a link in the video below. Check out the video I did. Actually, James, we might get you both the 265 and 465, and then they're subs.
That's a lot of speakers to review.
Yep, we're gonna keep you busy.
Yeah, that'd be cool. I look forward to hearing them. If I can get those, yeah. So, so yeah, that's the RBH. I think these are a great choice if you're looking for a very nice looking speaker made in America. Even if no, not even regarding them made, they're a solid speaker wherever they're made. If they were made in China, they'd still be really good speakers. So like, made in America is nice, but if you care about that thing, that's a bonus. Personally, I think it's not a big deal for me, right? I could have speakers made in like Iceland. It's the same for me, or Antarctica, right? Whatever. Yeah. So like, they're just good speakers. I like them. Read the full review. We give you way more depth than that. So like, if you want to know more, we have an online review.
Link below. Read the website, audioholics.com. Well, James, I appreciate all your effort here testing out these RBH speakers. Please read the review, like I said. Guys, if you like this video, please hit the thumb up, hit subscribe. Don't forget about our Patreon channel at patreon.com/audioholics. We appreciate your support. And until next time, my friends, keep listening.